Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to today's verification and certification webinar covering the formal levels of Young STEM Leader Programme, which is YSL4, YSL5 and YSL6. My name is Jamie, and I'll be taking you through all of the aspects of verification that I think you should know about in order to take your Young STEM Leaders through the final part of their formal levels and make sure that the certification process goes smoothly. Today's session will last about half an hour, about half an hour of me speaking and taking you through the different parts of the process. And at the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions. There is a little quiz on Menti just to get a feel for what your kind of thoughts are about verification. I've posted a link in the chat, or you can scan that QR code that's on your screen just now in order to do that quiz. So please just take a wee moment to complete that, and I'll be back with you in a moment's time to move on with the webinar. Okay, so in today's session, it seems like we have a mixture of people delivering YSL5 and YSL6, and some people delivering the non-formal levels too. So this session is specifically focused on the formal levels. Lots of the processes are the same, especially when it comes to certification and external verification. But if you have any questions about non-formal levels, you can pop them in the chat, or I can come to them at the end as well. But today's session is about the formal levels. So the next question, how confident do you feel about the following? So most people are kind of average level of confidence, I suppose, about internal verification. Some less confident, some more confident, and more people want to know, I guess, about the certification process and external verification and how that works. So today we'll be going through all three of those. So hopefully by the end, we'll be moving you up that scale towards the very confident end of it. And a few questions here that will hopefully be covered by the end of this session. So how to verify internally and make contact with others. Definitely we'll go through that today for sure. Overall view of the process and in general to build your confidence, and how does certification work is definitely another question that will be answered. So hopefully by the end we'll get through all of these questions, and if I haven't, please just let me know and I'll be able to come to it at the end. So just before we get started, we've got a couple of announcements. Most of you will be formal level tutor assessors, and you may want some more guidance on how to be delivering the program at the moment. We have a host of guidance on our website. If you go onto our website, youngstemleader.scot, a little orange bar will pop up at the bottom, and that has some guidance there on ways that you can be continuing the award during centre closures, whether that's running the award remotely or delivering it in bubbles and hubs, or however you're delivering the award right now. Or even just to kind of look through that guidance for picking the award back up when centres reopen in the coming months. And some good news, YSL4, the last level of the Young STEM Leader Programme to be developed, is being launched as we speak. So the YSL4 SDQF level 4 support notes, logs and activity pack are all now available for you to download on the Tutor Assessor part of the website in the resources section. The online logs are still being developed, and they should be available early next week. And I'll send out an email to all Tutor Assessors when those do become available. But if you are thinking you want to start delivering YSL4, you can go and have a look through those documents and see if it's appropriate for your level. It's very similar to the content of non-formal YSL4, if you're familiar with that, and it focuses on the positive impact of STEM throughout it. It's a really great award level, but I'm perhaps slightly biased when I say that. So today's session will cover three things. We'll first start by looking at internal verification. We'll then look at certification, and finally, briefly, we'll touch on external verification. All of this information should be contained within the quality assurance verification and certification policy. So if you have any more questions that I don't cover today, It's a good place to kind of refresh yourself on how the process works. But if you do have any questions as we go through today's session, you can either pop them in the chat box or you can raise your hand on Zoom, and I should be able to get to your question at the end. But it's all well and good me sitting here and telling you all about verification, but that would be pretty boring. So we're going to start just for the first few minutes by watching a video that was made by some of our young STEM leaders in St Martin's Primary School in Glasgow. And they'll briefly talk you through the verification and certification process and how that works. So it's over to them.
Hi, we are the young STEM leaders of St Martin's Primary School, and we are here to talk to you about verification.
We're going to let Graeme and Jamie, the young STEM leader program project team, do this bit, but we thought we'd step in and give them some help.
It's not that they are boring or that they don't know what they're talking about. We just thought you'd like to hear it from some young STEM leaders.
Everything you need to know about quality assurance is in the policy, which you should all have access to.
Quality assurance is so important, and it makes sure that everyone is delivering young STEM leader program to the same high standards it deserves.
When at or near the start of the program, it's important who the tutor assessor and internal verifier are. Remember, the internal verifier must be a trained tutor assessor. You should then choose which young STEM leaders' logs will be in your sample batch for verification.
The policy gives you guidance on this.
If you're doing a formal level of the Young STEM Leader program, now's the time to fill in section 1 of the IV form.
If you're doing non-formal levels, you don't need to use the IV1 form, but do keep a record of your verification progress.
For formal levels, the internal verifier needs to observe the tutor assessor delivering the program. This can be a quick drop into a class or club, or even joining the online activity they might be doing.
This isn't needed for non-formal levels, but it's good to practice if you do. The internal verifier should use a quality assurance checklist when they observe the group.
You'll find that in the policy too.
For every level of the program, the internal verifier must look over their sample batch logs and use the quality assurance checklist. Online logs can be shared between the tutor assessor and the internal verifier using the tutor access button on your dashboard. If you are using hard copies of the log, just hand the sample batch over to the internal verifier. Remember to wash your hands. Some internal verifiers choose to observe the group in action and check the sample batch logs at the same time.
That's a good idea if you can, but don't worry if you can't. Formal level, the rest of the IV1 form can be filled in.
For non-formal, the internal verifier and tutor assessor just need to agree the logs have been assessed correctly.
So that's the internal verification process complete. What's next?
When you finish the program and the young STEM leaders have completed their logs, it's certificate time.
Email the project team set to let them know you've completed the program and you've completed the internal verification too.
You might be chosen for external verification at that stage. This is where an extra quality assurance check is carried out by the project team.
Don't worry though, this is also really straightforward.
And when all of this is done, your young STEM leaders will get their certificates.
There's just one last thing to do at this point.
Celebrate the amazing achievements you and your young STEM leaders have made!
So thanks to our special guests from St Martin's Primary School for that wonderful video. They've pretty much explained the whole process, so I don't know if there's much more that I need to say. So we'll first have a look at internal verification. This is the process that every tutor assessor will need to complete before they request certification for their group of young STEM leaders. An internal verification is a process that happens between you, the tutor assessor, and your internal verifier, which is another tutor assessor. So firstly, the tutor assessor, you will complete the program and you will have assessed the logs and made assessment decisions on those logs. You will, as part of the process, share the sample batch logs with your internal verifier, and we'll talk about what that means in a bit. And you will complete part of our internal verification paperwork, which we call the IV1 form. So you'll be completing the first section of that form. And then you will request certification of your young STEM leaders. The internal verifier must be a trained tutor assessor. They don't have to be delivering the program. They just need to have gone through that 2-hour training session that you will have gone through as well. They need to, at the formal levels, complete 2 things. They need to look over the sample batch logs, and they need to complete an observation of you as a tutor assessor using the quality assurance checklist. They then complete the second and third parts of that IV1 form. Stage 2 relates to the observation, and stage 3 relates to the sample batch logs. The internal verifier can be from a different centre. They don't have to be from your centre. And if you are looking to get in touch with someone to be your internal verifier, you can ask me to help recommend another tutor assessor, or you can post on one of our Basecamp groups, and I'm sure there will be another lonely tutor assessor in another school that's in the same having the same problem as you. So you can match up and be each other's internal verifier, even though you're from a different centre. So this is what the IV1 form looks like. At stage 1, which is at the top, this section will be completed by you as a tutor assessor. So it really just involves giving some details about your centre name, the SCQF level of the young STEM leaders that are taking part, who your tutor assessor and internal verifier are, the size of your cohort, the size of the sample, and identifying which young STEM leader logs are going to be in that verification sample batch. You'll then agree with your internal verifier a date for stage 2 and stage 3 of the verification. We ask you to select one SCQF level because the verification process has to take place for each level of the program that you're delivering. So for example, if you're delivering YSL4 and YSL6 with 2 different groups, you're going to have to complete internal verification twice for once for each of those groups. But it can be the same tutor assessor and the same IV that does that. So you will agree the sample batch size based on the guidance, which we'll talk about in a second. You'll agree the dates for stages 2 and stages 3, stages 2 and 3, sorry. And then you as a tutor assessor will just fill in that top part of the paperwork, which should be really straightforward to do. In terms of the sample batch, there's some guidance in the policy document for how many young STEM leaders need to go through that verification process. It's normally about 20% of your young STEM leader cohort size, but as long as it's within that range, that's fine. So for example, if you have 1 to 20 young STEM leaders, you need between 1 and 4 in your sample batch. But if you're approaching the kind of 20 mark for the number of young STEM leaders, then I would suggest having 4 in your sample batch. And we'd take that as a kind of minimum value. If you want to do more, by all means, go ahead and verify more. We recommend that within your cohort sample batch, you have a wide variety of ability levels, just to make sure that the verification process is as representative as possible across your cohort. And it is, if you're not finished the award, if not all of the young STEM leaders in your cohort are finished the award, that's fine. It's possible to IV the whole cohort at once, but then certificate them separately. So for example, if you had 30 young STEM leaders and half of them were finished their award and half of them maybe had a few weeks or a couple of months left to go until they were ready to finish the award, you can do the IV process once for that whole cohort of young STEM leaders and then submit 2 certification requests, and you wouldn't have to IV again for the second certification. As part of this process, you as a tutor assessor will need to share logs with your internal verifier, and you can do that by giving them paper copies, by sharing screenshots, photos, or scans of the log by email, or you can give them through the Young STEM Leader website. If they've completed logs online, you can give them access using the tutor access function on the tutor assessor dashboard. Stage 2 is to do with the observation. So as the internal verifier will observe the tutor assessor delivering the program and making assessment decisions. So this can be a physical face-to-face observation, or it can be an online observation. Perhaps if you have an online Teams Meet or Google Classroom or Google Meet, sorry, with your group of young STEM leaders, the internal verifier could be there. During kind of remote learning we're quite flexible by what this observation actually means, but as long as there is some way to observe how the program is being delivered and how the tutor assessor is making assessment decisions, then that's fine. There is a quality assurance checklist in that quality assurance verification policy, which the internal verifier should use when they're making these observations of the tutor assessor. And the internal verifier completes stage 2 of the IV1 form. And just looking at that in a bit more detail, they have to tick that all 5 requirements in that quality assurance checklist are being met. And then we ask that the internal verifier provides a comment for each of those sections as well. And then any matters arising or action required based on this observation can be written there by the tutor assessor or by the internal verifier. And we ask that both the TA and the IV sign this to make sure that they're both happy with the comments that have been made and any recommendations that have been made by the internal verifier as well. Once you've completed that observation and stage 2 has been agreed by both the IV and the TA, you'll then move on to stage 3 of the internal verification process. This can be done at exactly the same time during the observation, for example, or as part of that observation, or it can be done as 2 separate processes. It just depends how logistically that might work in your setting. For stage 3, the tutor assessor will need to share logs with the internal verifier, and as I said, that can be done paper copies, online, however is most appropriate for you. As an internal verifier, they will be reviewing the sample logs to make sure that they agree with the assessment decisions that are being made, and those assessment decisions are accurate and are consistent across the whole logs. And also making sure that the content written or given in video evidence or photos or whichever type of evidence the young STEM leader has produced, making sure that that meets the requirements, the minimum action required set out in the support notes for that level. When they've done that, the internal verifier will complete their part of stage 3 of the logs. They'll comment whether the sample logs are complete, and if you're doing a half cohort verification, as we talked about a minute ago, you could provide us a comment as to why the logs aren't complete, for example, if you're doing a half batch verification. And any comments relating to that quality assurance checklist, again, there are some statements there relating to the assessment decisions. You'll then have to, as an IV, comment on whether or not you think the assessment decisions are accurate. And again, any matters arising or action required will be agreed by the tutor assessor and internal verifier and put in this section here, signed off by both of you. If you're if the young STEM leaders are writing in paper logs, you'll then need to, there's a couple of kind of signature parts that need to be done there. So there's the authenticity statements, which are on the inside front cover of the paper logs, and that for the sample batch should be signed off by the internal verifier, just so that those sample batch logs could be identified in the future. Just a quick note on how to share the Young STEM Leader logs. You'll do that by going onto your dashboard on the Young STEM Leader website and clicking this Tutor Access button here, right next to My YSLs. And you, as a tutor assessor, to share your logs, all you need to do is type in your tutor assessor's name, the internal verifier's name in this box, and click Send Request. They'll then get an email notification notifying them that the logs have been shared, and that access request will show up in the tutor access part of the website as well. So they'll need to go onto the tutor access part as well, the same as you did. They'll then be able to click on your name. So for example, if I had shared logs with you, this is what your dashboard would look like. It would say Jamie Mingus has shared access to his Young STEM leaders here. You then click on my name and you'd be able to see a list of all of my Young STEM leaders, and you'd then just go on and review the sample batch logs of those Young STEM leaders that had been selected for verification. And you're able to see attachments, photos, videos, all the things that you'd be able to see as a TA, you can see as an IV. So if you have any questions about the internal verification process, please pop them in the chat, or you can wait till the end and you can ask me. But the next stage is requesting certificates. So once you've done internal verification, that process is complete, all the paperwork's done, keep a hold of that IV1 form, and then you're ready to request certificates. Very, very straightforward at this stage. All you need to do is send an email attaching that IV1 form to youngstemleader@circ.scot, and myself or one of my colleagues will pick that email up and either select you for external verification, which I'll tell you about in a minute, or we'll send you a data request sheet for you to provide information about your Young STEM leaders so that we can issue their certificates. This data request spreadsheet is secure and password protected, and it's for you to fill in so that we can collect information about your Young STEM leaders. So we need their name, their sex, their date of birth, Scottish candidate number, and the Young STEM leader level that they're working at. And there's a short declaration here as well, just for you to complete, just to kind of reiterate that you need to have all logs completed. The IV1 form needs to be completed, and the authenticity statements need to be completed if you're using paper logs. And that's it. The certification process is very straightforward, and it's perhaps the easiest part of the three things that I'm telling you about today. For some tutor assessors, you may be selected for external verification at the time when you request your certificates. So the external verification process is an additional layer of quality assurance that is necessary for formal awards and non-formal awards in this case actually as well. But external verification happens between the tutor assessor and the external verifier at CERC. So when you request certification, you'll be notified at that stage whether or not you've been selected for external verification. And at that stage, we should already have your verification documents because you've attached those at the time, but then you'll need to give us access to the sample batch logs so that we can complete external verification. So again, you can do that in the same method as before by sending them by email, by post. We'll pay for the postage and you can get that to us, or via the online platform, you can share it with whoever is doing your external verification. The verifier, who will be one of my colleagues at CERC, or it will be one of our 17 associate regional trainers and verifiers who are across the country. One of those will review the sample batch logs and review the IV1 form, and we will complete what's known as an EV1 form, external verification form, and we'll deliver the result to you. So all you need to do for external verification is provide access to those sample batch logs, and we do the rest. If there's any additional evidence that you want to provide, for example, if logs, there's maybe some inconsistencies in how the logs have been completed and you've got some kind of other evidence to back that up, like photos or kind of testimonies or however you've gathered evidence, you can submit that at this stage as well for external verification. So the center selection for external verification is usually random. In your first year of delivery, it's quite likely that you will be selected for external verification, or you might be selected just randomly as well. If you've had a previous not accepted external verification result, you will then be externally verified the year after. Or if you have a particularly large cohort, for example, if you have 100 or more Young STEM leaders, it's very likely that you will be selected for external verification on this basis. As I said before, you'll be notified by email at certification and you give access to those sample batch logs, and we will review those and get back to you with a result. And there are 3 results that are possible for external verification. 2 are good results and 1 is a not so good result. So we have accepted. If your EV is accepted, that means that there's no action required. You're demonstrating good practice with your delivery of the Young STEM Leader Award, and basically keep up the good work. Accepted with recommendations, we see that as it's still a positive result. The EV has still been accepted, but we will provide some guidance on how you might improve the quality of the evidence or improve the experience of the award for young STEM leaders, or improve the quality of the IV process. So we might give you some recommendations, but still accept your EV. And the other result on the right-hand side is not accepted. This means that the SARC believes that the quality of the award, the quality of the evidence provided, or the quality of the internal verification process is not sufficient, and action needs to be taken before the young STEM leaders can be certificated. So we might recommend that actions be taken immediately. They might be small actions that can be done really quickly, and then your young STEM leaders can be certificated straight away. Or they might be longer term actions related to completing training for staff and things like that. If you do get a not accepted, you will then be externally verified the next time you come to certificating your young STEM leaders, and there are a list of sanctions in the quality assurance verification and certification policies that might be imposed. We haven't had any not accepted results so far this year, so hopefully that might give you a bit of confidence in the EV process. All of our external verifications so far have been accepted or accepted with recommendations. So just to kind of finish up my part of the webinar today, I'm just going to take you through a quick case study of a secondary school who went through this process. But if you have any questions, please let me know or pop them in the chat box. So this is a secondary school which went through the award last year. They had 9 young STEM leaders and they put 3 in their sample batch. And this is just an example of how the IV1 form, was completed. So they selected the date, the level, the cohort size, all of that information was put in there. And obviously the orange parts are covering up any protected information. They then selected their date for stage 2 and stage 3, and it's all written there nice and clearly. Each section had comments from the quality assurance checklist. We recommend that you do put comments. It just makes the whole external verification process much easier. And just kind of giving that clarification as to why you give a yes or no result is always really useful. So here there was no matters arising, no action required, perfect IV, and that was signed off by the tutor assessor and internal verifier at observation stage. Then if you look at stage 3, at the log review, the sample logs are all complete. Really good feedback from the internal verifier about the consistency in delivery and feedback, which is what we like to see. And that was again signed off by the tutor assessor and internal verifier. So, although we do like to have comments in every section, we're not asking for a huge amount in your IV1 form. Unless there are issues, it should be a straightforward process. And if there are any issues, please just write them in there and let us know what's been done to rectify any matters arising. This centre was then selected for external verification at certification stage. So at that point, we asked the tutor assessor to share that IV1 form with us and share the young STEM leader logs. That EV1 the form was completed by SARC and they got an accepted result. They shared the logs that had been done on Word documents. We had Word document logs and editable PDF logs last year that we no longer have. And those were shared with us so that we were able to view the sample batch logs. Once the result and the EV1 form was delivered, the tutor assessor was then able to complete the data request spreadsheet, which they filled in completely, and that little declaration part was completed as well. And we then returned the certificates to them within 2 weeks. And that's it. So hopefully the process is clear and straightforward. We really tried very hard to make the verification and certification process as straightforward as possible, because most of our practitioners delivering the award are very busy people. So I don't think it will take very long for you to go through this process, and hopefully it is actually quite useful in allowing you to reflect a bit on your practice delivering the Young STEM Leader Award. Just to kind of finish up, This is our kind of verification and certification checklist, if you like, just to kind of recap on all of what we've talked about today. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that all or the majority of your young STEM leaders have completed their young STEM leader logs. And at that stage, you'll be going through your internal verification process involving the observation and the review of the logs by the tutor assessors. Once you've completed internal verification, you're then ready to make that certification request by email, and then you will be selected or not for external verification. If that is accepted, we'll then award your certificates. If that is not accepted, we'll then detail the action that you need to take in order to bring that up to standard.